You may be seated. It's good to be back among you. Did anyone notice I was gone? It's okay if you didn't notice, because I'm going to tell you about where I went anyway. And I promise there is a sermon in here someplace too. So, I did something extraordinary this year. I spent a week in Greenland, flanked by brief stays in Iceland on either end of my trip. When I told people where I was going, they said, "Why? What is in Greenland?" My reason? Because I knew it would be extraordinary, and it was. I strapped on crampons and walked on a glacier, kayaked in the midst of a sea filled with incredibly beautiful icebergs, watched whales sleeping and diving, hiked in 50-plus mile-an-hour winds, and marveled at a people so resourceful they survive in a place where there are no trees and winter spans October to May. It was truly an extraordinary experience and worthy of my many moments of awe. Well, in the gospel reading we heard today, it seems that the crowd was expecting their own extraordinary experience, and they were sorely disappointed that Jesus wasn't fulfilling that expectation. This passage from John states that the Jews were grumbling that anyone claiming to have come down from heaven should be someone who's not just like them. Their complaints were based on the fact that Jesus seemed too ordinary, too well known to them to be someone so extraordinary, as surely the Son of God must be. Shouldn't the Son of God be more impressive, more easily recognized? When we encounter the holy, shouldn't it be more obvious? Well, as I'm sure many of you have noticed, that's not the way God works. In fact, God seems to enjoy the paradox of delivering big gifts in small, familiar boxes. John's lesson for us today is that the extraordinary is revealed in the ordinary, if you're paying attention. So let's consider something ordinary, like water. According to Bill Nye the Science Guy, who I really like, most of the water on Earth's surface has been around since the planet's formation, billions of years ago. This means that the water you drink today could have been sipped by a dinosaur. The water in the baptismal font comes from the same source as what you used to brush your teeth this morning. But the water in the font seems different. How does that happen? Well, when we set water aside and pray over it, expressing gratitude, recognizing all the ways God used water to bless and guide God's people, then we can connect with the holiness that has always been in the water. That water is not holy because a priest prayed over it. It's holy because the act of praying over it creates a different relationship between you and the water. All of the ordinary things in life have a connection to the divine and are all potential sources of spiritual sustenance for us. It all depends on how we look at them. Now, I'm going to share a story with you that I don't often share because it sounds a bit mystical, but I think it helps illustrate the point. It's a personal experience. When I was a student at the Richard Rohr's Living School, we had a week-long session in Albuquerque with lectures by Richard and other members of the Living School faculty. One afternoon, Richard commissioned us to disperse from the ballroom where we were meeting and to find something to sit with, just sit with. It could be an animate or inanimate object, man-made or natural. It was summertime, and I went out into the New Mexico heat, walked across a parking lot, and sat on a curb in the shade. There was a large tree nearby, and it became the focus of my attention. I took in the deep crevices of the bark and noticed that there were a lot of ants crawling around in there. My mental question to the tree was, "Don't those ants bother you?" The tree replied that the ants were just fine. I wondered how the tree felt about being there in a dusty, sandy patch of dirt between a concrete road and a parking lot full of cars reflecting the sun's heat. It seemed to me the tree would feel abused to be in such an inhospitable location. So I raised that question to the tree. The response I got was that I was to watch the people walking towards us on the sidewalk. When they passed us by, the tree pointed out to me that because it was there, in that spot, it was able to bless those people with its shade as they passed by. That tree became a bit of the bread of life for me that day because it connected me with the holiness packaged in the familiar. If God is the author of creation and created that tree, then we should be able to see it as God's handiwork, even though we've all seen countless trees. Recognizing God's presence in nature is pretty easy. Many of us feel that connection and find that time in the outdoors nourishes and refreshes. But I had a hard time feeling a spiritual connection with that hot, dusty parking lot scene in New Mexico until I took the time to really consider that tree. We all have a hunger which can only be satisfied by a relationship with the holy. We hunger for encounters which remind us that we are in relationship with God. Those encounters with the holy are cloaked in both the extraordinary and the ordinary. We can't satisfy our spiritual hunger by holding out for the extraordinary. If you can't find God's presence in the common, the exceptional will provide only temporary relief from what we all crave. I am the bread of life. Those who come to me shall not hunger. That invitation opens the door to a banquet which is always spread before us. Regardless of our state of mind or spirit, the banquet has been prepared and awaits our feasting. Much of what is spread there may seem plain, uncommon, not worthy of a special meal. But when the extraordinary has been devoured, when all that remains is the familiar, what seems mundane to the untrained heart still offers life-giving nourishment for the faithful. And for that, let us give thanks to God.